Good morning, and thank you for joining us today to talk about the programs in the federal budget that support investment in hydrogen, carbon capture, and green technology. My name is Lynette Tremblay. I'm the Vice President, Strategy and Innovation for Edmonton Global. Edmonton Global is an organization focused on transforming and growing the economy of the Edmonton metropolitan region through increasing investment attraction and global exports. Global investors consider a number of factors in deciding where to put their next investment, and two factors near the top of the list are cost and ESG profile of a jurisdiction. The environmental, social, and governance policies of a jurisdiction are factoring into investment decisions now more than ever. And programs in this budget, like carbon capture tax credits, Clean Fuels Fund, and the Net Zero Accelerator Fund, send a signal to global investors that we want their investments and we're committed to high environmental, social, and governance standards. I'm now going to ask Edmonton Global CEO Malcolm Bruce to speak a bit to the nature of the investment opportunities we see and what our value proposition is to these investors. Malcolm, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lynette, and thank you, Ministers O'Regan and Minister Carr. This is a very important moment in time for Canada, Alberta, and our region. We're grateful that you're making yourselves available to answer a few questions from our local media, as well as our local businesses later today. While there's a lot to unpack and discuss in the federal budget, as mentioned by Lynette, we want to focus really around hydrogen and clean/green technology. Hydrogen can be a major solution to the global carbon challenge. There is no better place in the world to drive this energy transition than right here in the Edmonton metropolitan region. We have an abundance of natural resources, best-in-class carbon sequestration infrastructure, and technologies to produce net zero carbon hydrogen. This region has the talent, innovation, access to global markets, and partners in place to make that happen now. There's a race to export hydrogen is on. Canada has a competitive advantage because it's one of the lowest cost places in the world to make low carbon hydrogen, but this advantage won't last forever. We need to move quickly. Our region is moving aggressively. Just last week, we launched Canada's first hydrogen hub, aptly named the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. And we are actively working on developing those export markets that we see are going to be an advantage to Canada. The size of the prize is enormous, both in terms of domestic consumption as well as the international market. Our goal is more than just production and export, however. This will be a new industry, and there'll be investments in manufacturing, research, technology, transportation, finance that will ripple across this country in a positive manner. I also want to highlight that when we talk about hydrogen, we should be focused on carbon intensity, not color. And I've heard Minister O'Regan talk about this previously. Whenever possible, we need to drive the discussion to low and ideally net zero carbon emissions. When we talk to jurisdictions like California, they are clear that this fits their definition of green. Again, it's the actual carbon intensity that matters, and we need to ensure that that's what's being measured and rewarded. Past and continued investment in CCUS are driving this, and it's really beginning to drive investments and growth across industries looking to decarbonize. What makes our region so unique is the combination of low carbon or net zero and low cost. Companies and investors don't have to compromise on either emissions or costs. Both are achievable with current technologies and infrastructure that already exist in the Edmonton region. That's why investment opportunity is here right now. It's ethically produced, safe, and environmentally responsible, and we're able to scale to meet national and international demands. On the green tech side, this too is an encouraging area of focus within the federal budget. As a nation, we have tremendous entrepreneurs and businesses ready to lead the charge on addressing climate change. The programs announced will make it easier and decrease their risk in driving innovation, commercialization, and adoption of green technologies. Again, thank you very much for meeting with us and listening to a few of our industry partners. We greatly appreciate your engagement here, and we want to thank both of you and the team at Western Economic Development that have been such valued and collaborative partners, and we look forward to working with you on the implementation of the programs found within the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. And now I'd like to introduce the Honorable Jim Carr, Minister and Special Representative for the Prairies. Minister, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me. It's amazing how much ground we can track using these computers. These computers are really the airplanes. We haven't been on an airplane for many, many, many months, but we can cover a lot of ground with this device. It's not quite the same thing, but it's very useful to be able to stay in touch with so many people in such a short period of time. And I'm talking to you from my home in Winnipeg, which is Treaty 1 territory, which is the territory of the Anishinaabe people, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. Well, happy Earth Day. And what better day to be talking about green recovery and jobs. You know, I've got all kinds of notes here that detail what's in the budget. I think you know probably by now what those elements are that speak directly to Alberta, to the Edmonton region, to all of the things that have been mentioned so far. Just want to add a very important $1.9 billion investment in the National Trade Corridors Fund, which also will impact people in Edmonton and in the region. These are investments that are so important that build the pillars for future economic success. They will alleviate bottlenecks and congestion. They'll also reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. And as has been referenced already, we are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in reskilling and in retraining, working with the private sector, working with institutions, especially in the Alberta region, that we think will have a very important impact on what our kids can aspire to do in the next generation. After all, this is about creating meaningful jobs for young Albertans and young Canadians. But first, as we all know, we have to get to the other side of this pandemic. And that's why the budget is full of measures to make sure that we are protecting individuals, businesses, and communities. So there's an awful lot to digest. I was joking with somebody on the phone the other day that I'm on page 793 of the budget. I've seen an awful lot of budgets come and go over many, many years, but none quite like this one. When you look at the historic investment in childcare, in retraining, in green investments, in taking us into the next generation of energy development in Canada, it's really quite an extraordinary document. And now, of course, it's a pleasure for me to introduce my friend and my colleague, Minister Seamus O'Regan, who has spent a lot of time virtually in Alberta, who has come to develop personal and trusting relationships with people within the government of Alberta, in the sector, and really throughout the community. So, Seamus, thanks for bringing us all together this morning. And now, over to you.
Jim, thank you very much. It's great to see you. I mean, I feel like I'm sometimes, I don't know who's Batman to who's Robin, Jim, but I love working with him. And Jim and I have a standing meeting every Tuesday evening where we cut through a lot of what's happening, because a lot is happening in the natural resources sector. A lot is happening in the prairie, and for everybody, including, I'm sure, a lot of people in this meeting and who are watching this conversation, it is hard to keep up. There is a lot of things moving in the marketplace globally. I'm joining you from the island of Newfoundland, as many of you know, the ancestral homeland of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk peoples. I'm also proudly a Newfoundlander, a Labradorian, in one of Canada's proud oil-producing provinces. Of course, ours offshore, not onshore. You know, when I have to harken back, Jim, I remember when I got this job as Minister of Natural Resources, Jim had said to me, you know, as a former minister, he had said, Seamus, I know you travel a lot of rural Canada in your role as Veterans Affairs Minister and Indigenous Services Minister. But now natural resources, you're going to have to get used to traveling to some awful places like Vienna and Paris and Santiago, and, you know, promoting Canada's natural resources and our expertise on a global scale. And of course, the joke a year later is I've gone to all of those meetings from my house or my office. An amazing thing, though, an amazing thing. Lynn, thank you and the team at Edmonton Global for hosting this. It's great to be zooming back to Alberta. I wish I was there. I think I was there about in the brief time before the pandemic hit and I held this office. I think I was there about every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. Anyway, we're all doing what we need to do. We're staying apart. We're keeping each other safe. Vaccines are here. We need to dig deep. We need to hold fast, I think, a little longer. Throughout this pandemic, your federal government has said it would have your back. And that is what Budget 2021 is really all about. It's conquering COVID-19. It's finishing the fight. It's healing the wounds it's left behind and building back better. It's a plan that puts Canadians first for a prosperous, resilient recovery that lowers emissions and gets us to net zero by 2050. And when you look back at it, with the investments announced in the fall economic statement and in Canada's strengthened climate plan, it's ambitious, it's significant, and
perfect. Okay,
and it's green. And when we say green, we mean investment, we mean jobs, we mean economic growth that leaves no one, no region,
but also a lot of
either yours. I think somebody, if I could ask somebody to go on mute there, perhaps they may not be on mute. But it means jobs, it means economic growth, and no region left behind, whether it be your region or my region out here in Newfoundland and Labrador. It also means that we're following the money, when we look at how the marketplace is moving. And we have to take a very close look at how the marketplace is moving, where investors are going. And in the immortal words of Walter Gretzky and his advice to his son Wayne, skate to where the puck is going. Since October, we have announced $53 billion towards a green recovery. $53 billion for everything from public transit to social infrastructure to low carbon fuels and everything in between. So here's what it means for Edmonton and for Alberta. $1.5 billion to develop low carbon fuels like renewable natural gas, biofuels, hydrogen. I don't need to tell anyone here, I think, about the potential of hydrogen. Just last week, Edmonton launched Canada's first hydrogen hub, backed by $2 million, all three levels of government working together, because Alberta can produce the world's least expensive clean hydrogen. You got the people, you got the skills, you got the expertise, you got the infrastructure, and you got the drive. $319 million and new investment tax credits for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, because CCUS is a critical piece to lowering our emissions. It is essential to blue hydrogen, and oil and gas workers are the ones who know how to build it. So we need to expand it. We have a new 50% tax cut for companies that manufacture zero emissions technologies. We're making Canada one of the most competitive jurisdictions in the world for clean tech, and $5 billion over the next 7 years in the Net Zero Accelerator to decarbonize large emitters and transform some key economic sectors in this country. All these investments speak to where we're going, to net zero, and what we need to do to get there. And we've heard this term a lot, transition. And I'm always reticent to use it because I just think people have enough going on. And I used to say this before the pandemic, just fluctuations in market and the economy and people are busy. The idea of some sort of looming transition makes people anxious. I don't like making people anxious, right? I know this because I got friends and neighbors who are oil workers. I say this, but just so you know, I got skin in the game. Newfoundland and Labrador is more dependent on its oil and gas revenues than Alberta. So I got skin in this game. So when I talk about transition, what I'm talking about here really is lowering emissions and building up renewables. And this is where Albertans will lead, just as Albertans have led on countless occasions before, with ingenuity, with hard work, and with determination. That'll get us to where we need to go. Bill Gates said as much at CERAWeek in Houston this year, said it was our oil and gas workers who understand the complex engineering involved. These are the people who will build renewables. These are the people who will lower emissions. I mean, the workers here in this province figured out how to get oil out of sand, and in a generation made Canada the 4th biggest producer of oil in the world. That is remarkable. So now we need that same ingenuity, that same determination, that same level of expertise and experience to build up renewables, to capture carbon, to lower emissions. And we are right by your side. Budget 2021 invests $2 billion in our workers, in training, to retool, to learn new skills for success, for apprenticeships, for community workforce development, to help workers transition to new jobs and to lower emissions and build renewables. It is about ensuring that no one is left behind, no energy worker and no energy producing region, like Alberta, like Saskatchewan, like mine. That is what it has to be about. So my mouth is getting dry. My mother always says it's a sign you're talking too much. I want to hear from other great speakers, but let me just finish with this. One more thing. World leaders today announced new climate ambitions. The Prime Minister announced Canada's increased ambition to reduce emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030. We will not be left behind. We will not be left behind. We will lead. This is how we double down on our common mission: net zero emissions by 2050, a prosperous economy that continues to create jobs, and a low carbon future that leaves no one behind. I know that is a lot. I know that is ambitious, but we are Canada, and that is what we do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Minister, and Minister Carr. You're absolutely right with the magic of Zoom. We are joining you, Malcolm and I believe Mark as well, joining you from Treaty 6 territory here in Alberta. And our next speaker is actually joining us from the US. So we're quite fortunate to be able to bring all of us together for one event virtually. And we're also fortunate to have two industry leaders to speak a little bit to exactly what you were referencing, Minister, on the hydrogen and carbon capture fronts. First, I'd like to ask Eric Guder, Vice President, Hydrogen for Mobility with Air Products, to speak to exactly that on the hydrogen front. Air Products is the world's leading hydrogen producer, and Eric is based in their California office and is responsible for the company's Hydrogen for Mobility business. Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Annette, Yvette, and Edmonton Global for hosting the event. Thank you, Minister Reagan and Minister Carr as well. On behalf of Air Products, it's my pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this discussion. As the leader in outsourced hydrogen production globally and here in Canada, we are encouraged by the bold steps contained in the draft budget. We believe this proposal demonstrates the necessary leadership to jumpstart an aggressive transition to carbon neutrality, and is well designed to utilize Canada's abundant and low-cost natural resources, its extensive infrastructure, its highly skilled workforce, and innovative spirit to be a model for other jurisdictions around the globe. Carbon capture use and storage and hydrogen for mobility are key areas of focus for Air Products, leveraging our 80+ years of experience to bring innovative solutions to solve the world's most challenging environmental problems. We believe that strong government policies like the one contained in the draft budget are a necessary component of the energy transition, and understand the challenge faced by governments to implement them. I've personally been involved in CCUS and hydrogen for mobility policy development, both in the US and Canada, and see many similarities in what Canada is proposing. To that end, we look forward to sharing our experience from around the globe and lessons learned to assist the Canadian government in finalizing the budget, so we can begin the hard work of developing the necessary opportunities and projects that will be crucial to Canada's economic and sustainable future. Thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with you more, and I'll turn it back over to you, Lynette.
Thanks, Eric. And finally, I'd like to ask Mark Pattenden, Vice President Manufacturing for Canada with Shell. And he's also the General Manager of the Scotford Manufacturing Complex, a global leader in carbon capture, usage and storage, and located in Alberta's industrial heartland here in the Edmonton metropolitan region. Mark, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you, Lynette, and thank you, Minister Reagan and Minister Carr, for inviting us to share a few words today. So at Shell, we are proud to be the operators of Quest, which is the carbon capture and storage facility, which captures 1 million tonnes of CO2 annually from the Scotford upgraders located just northeast of Edmonton. Quest is made possible in part due to government partnerships at both federal and provincial level, And the facility demonstrates CCS not only works, but it works exceptionally well. Incredible in terms of operational performance over the last 6 years. And in fact, to date, we've captured and safely stored over 6 million tonnes of CO2 ahead of schedule and far less in terms of the anticipated cost. As a company, Royal Dutch Shell has set a target to be a net zero emissions carbon business by 2050, in step with society's progress and also in line with Canada's ambition to be net zero at the same time. This target not only covers the emissions from our operations, but also the emissions from all the products we sell to our customers. As Shell moves to its net zero ambition, we've chosen 6 locations around the world to transform our assets into chemicals and energy parks. And I'm proud to share that Scotford is one of those 6 locations. We will look to leverage technologies such as CCS at these facilities alongside renewable electricity, renewable feedstocks to transform traditional refining and petrochemical operations, as well as produce whatever color of and whatever carbon intensity of hydrogen we need to produce. The potential to grow CCS at Scotford will allow us to reduce the carbon footprint of the fuels we make today and enable the production of clean fuels of the future, including new products such as hydrogen. Alberta is well positioned to produce these future clean fuels, such as hydrogen, an excellent CO2 reservoir capacity underneath a very large proportion of Alberta, along with the availability of natural gas, water, sources of renewable electricity, as well as, of course, the source of biogenic feedstocks from both the agriculture and the forestry industries as well. So there's good reason to be excited about the prospects for the Edmonton region to grow as a hydrogen production hub. There's still no doubt challenges in front of us, but I'm encouraged to see the cooperation of multiple levels of government to help provide the right context for future hydrogen production and also export. Thanks very much, and looking forward to continuing the conversation for the rest of this program.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to all of our speakers this morning. I'd now like to open the floor to questions from media. If you're from the media and you have questions for any one of our speakers, could you please write your name and media outlet in the Q&A, and we'll call on you and you'll be able to unmute your microphone. The first question we have registered is from Josie Ho. Josie, we're going to unmute you, and could you please identify which outlet you are from and ask your question. Are we able to unmute Josie? Josie, go ahead and ask your question, and if you could let us know which media outlet you're from. You might be having some technical difficulties. See the box lighting up, but no sound coming out. Well, she did actually enter the question in the Q&A, so perhaps I will, oh, she just mentioned her audio is not working. So I'll read the question out, and maybe we'll toss it over to the ministers to respond. So her question is, will the government reconsider allowing EOR for the CCUS investment tax credit? EOR is the largest consumer of CO2 in Canada, and depleted oil and gas reservoirs are very suitable candidates for CCUS, as the geology is well understood. EOR technology has also been utilized for 50 years, so there's a lot of experience to draw from as CCUS scales up. The US program offers a CCUS tax credit for EOR, albeit at a lower rate than permanent sequestration. Minister O'Regan, probably the best question for you.
Sure. Yeah, it's a new investment tax credit for capital invested in CCUS projects, and the goal is to reduce emissions by at least 15 megatons of CO2 annually. It'll come into effect in 2022. There is a 90-day consultation period with stakeholders on the design of the investment tax credit, and after that, we'll announce details, including the rate of the incentive. It isn't intended that the investment tax credit be available for EOR projects. The government is committed to phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. So it's not intended that the investment tax credit be available for EOR, but look, the details of the investment tax credit for CCUS will be released after that 90-day consultation period with stakeholders, and that consultation will include the Alberta government, obviously, who we work hand in glove with, and we'll be encouraging them to create some complementary measures for CCUS projects in their jurisdiction. So. And also to mention too that the government intends to make that credit available for direct air capture projects, which are becoming increasingly viable and quite exciting.
Thanks, Minister. And we don't have any other immediate questions registered, but wanted to offer an opportunity to Eric or Mark if you had a question or comment that you would like to make, and then we'll transition to our closed.
Hang on, we weren't prepared for this.
We like to keep it free flowing here.
I have no questions to ask. Look forward to continuing the dialogue, especially over the 90-day period to begin the consultation period and have a constructive dialogue about how we move this forward. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, and Eric, just to say, I mean, and you appreciate this more than most, and Jim and I discuss this all the time. It is incredible how fast the American government has changed in a very short order. It is amazing the difference an election can make. I did not think I would see in my lifetime a U.S. government tackle climate change with all the might of the American government and an increasing might from the American marketplace and investors. And as I often say to people, the United States is our closest friend and ally. It is also, as many people in Alberta know, our biggest customer. And the terms on what they want from certain products that we export to them, those terms have changed. And I was always taught you listen to your customer. But you are also our biggest competitor, which is exciting because look, you caused us to up our game. And we have been, the past number of years during the Trump administration, which was like deleting the words climate change from every communique that we would write with them. The Biden administration saying we want climate change in the headline, and if you could make it a 20-point font, we'd be happy with that. It is a sea change. But we have been dealing in the short time, less than a year that I've been natural resources minister, during the Trump administration, we heard from businesses saying, like, we don't have, you're encumbering upon us all of these things in combating climate change, like a price on pollution, like a clean fuel standard. And the Americans are going the other direction. It is hurting our companies. I venture a guess now, given what we have been going through over the past number of years, preparing for this moment in combating climate change. The marketplace is there. The Americans are there. We are all heading in the right direction, and Canada is ready. We are ready. We have been at this for a few years, and so this is exciting. And we are prepared and ready to be the responsible producers of natural resources for your needs, not just in crude oil, but in critical minerals and a whole host of other things. And we're there to compete with you too. All right. So it's good. It's good. And we are heading in the right direction on combating climate change. But the marketplace has moved, and it is astounding to watch it in action. It is astounding.
We're very excited about the new direction that the U.S. has taken. To your comment about competition and partnership, no question, very, very close and special partnership together. I enjoy the competitive nature of it because I think that makes us both up our games in pursuit of zero emissions and the energy transition. So very excited about that. And certainly both jurisdictions can leverage each one's strengths to deliver both carbon capture and storage and hydrogen applications, leveraging all the things that I mentioned in my opening comments. So very excited about that, and excited to be partnering with you to develop this policy that inevitably is going to make Canada very much a leader in these areas.
Just yesterday, I'll just add one more thing. Just yesterday, speaking at the International Energy Agency, but speaking also yesterday with U.S. Energy Secretary Granholm and with leaders from the European Union and from India and from Africa about how this transition that we're going through needs to be a worker-centered transition. And that is not because I am, necessarily being charitable. It is because these are the people you need. These are the people who built the industry in Alberta and Saskatchewan, who figured out how to get oil out of sand. And if I could take some credit here in my neck of the woods, the president of ExxonMobil Canada told me that there is no harsher environment in which ExxonMobil operates in the world than the North Atlantic of Newfoundland. And if you've ever been out there or suffered through the weather on this island, you know what I'm talking about. I am proud that we've managed to do that. And it's these same people working together, and the federal government's going to be there for this, working together. That's what's going to help us meet our goals. These are the people who will help us meet our goals. Who else could? Nobody else has the ability, the qualifications, the expertise, or the grit to do it. Jim, I throw it over to you for any thoughts.
And after Minister Carr closes, then we'll shift over to the closed roundtable, and then we'll close off the media availability. So go ahead, Minister.
I would just add that this is also a moment and an example of how powerful it is when governments and the private sector work together towards a combined goal. We have for too long and with too much intensity been at loggerheads among jurisdictions, among interests. But because of circumstance, in part because of the pandemic, in part because of leadership, we now understand that what the people really want is to see that their leaders are pulling in the same direction. And this is a good example of that. The opportunities are absolutely boundless, absolutely boundless. So I'll stop there, Lynette, and why don't we move into the next phase of the chat?
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. We're going to close off the public media availability portion and open up our closed roundtable. We have a number of additional participants joining us, so